Welcome back to the Dental Marketing Summit Series. This is segment 2, which means you've logged on, you've done your client survey.
Uh-huh.
We have analyzed your market area. We have analyzed your marketable attributes and determined exactly how marketable you are as a dental practice. And we've returned to you a workbook. This is where the workbook needs to be opened, along with the slides, and we're going to give you some supporting slides in our documentation. Those would be good to print out, actually, and write notes on. So you might have two booklets in front of you, one of the slides and one of the marketing plan. Segment 2 is largely about the business of dentistry, how to start building a sound marketing plan. And it's not just a marketing plan for the next year. It's the way you build a marketing plan basically for the rest of your dental career. So if you have 10 years left or 20 years left, or maybe you're a startup and you have 30 years left, you should always be able to refer back to this content. And if you do, and if you follow these steps, you have a 80 to 90% chance of using your promotion budget wisely and more effectively to generate the patients you're looking for. In segment 1, we really broke down the dental consumer. We discussed our testing. We discussed our independent consumer study. We talked about the conjoint analysis. We broke down everything: price, conveniences, technology. And usually when we get to this point in our live presentation, we get sort of a deer in the headlights look, don't we? I mean, it's a whole change in perception. Dentists and their teams have been beaten upon, by the dental consumer, maybe by other colleagues and dentists, and maybe even other marketing people, into thinking that the only thing people care about is price, right? Which leads dentists to promote their practice primarily on price. And in the first segment, we discovered that's only 35 points, right? If you only promote price, or you primarily promote price, you're really only 35% of the way of being the ideal dentist. We have an exercise for you. Normally we do this live, because normally we would have 15, 20, 30 females between 28 and 68 in the actual audience.
Yeah.
Can't do that here because we're obviously on a video. And even if we did, you would think it was staged. You wouldn't believe it. So we invite you to do your own exercise in your own circle, social circles, maybe even your own patients, right?
Yeah.
Find 6 to 10 females, 28 to 68. Keep a score sheet and ask them the following question. Would you choose a healthcare provider for your family based primarily on price? And keep score. How many say yes and how many say no? And what you're going to find out is you're going to find out what we've been saying for years. The dental market is females 28 to 68. However, that market is split in half. Half the women, half the moms will choose a healthcare provider for their family based primarily on price.
Primarily on price.
Right. I don't think anybody would argue with that, because there's all kinds of data and results to support it. What we're saying is what about the other moms? The other half of the dental market. Those moms would never choose a healthcare provider for their family based primarily on price.
Right.
That's the bottom line.
They understand more about the value of what they're getting.
Or they're looking for more value.
Or they're looking for more value.
Right.
And they're less concerned about price.
They don't necessarily know what they're looking for. They just know that price is not going to be the determining factor in choosing a healthcare provider for their family.
Not the primary
Not the
one.
primary reason.
No.
I would go so far as to say, and I've done this, and it has proven to be true, that promoting a dental practice based primarily on price will actually alienate the top half of the dental market. So as we move forward, when we refer to the top half and the bottom half is defined as the part of the market that will choose a healthcare provider based primarily on price.
Mhm.
The top half is going to be defined as the part of the dental market that would never choose a healthcare provider for her family based primarily on price. So when we say bottom half and top half, that's important that you understand what we're talking about. Okay.
Mhm.
All right, let's move on. Segment 2 is basically a dental CEO guide. You are the CEO of your if you're the dentist and you're the owner of the practice, you are the CEO of your dental practice. You may not be the dentist or the owner. You may be someone that the dentist or the owner delegates to,
Mhm.
who's in charge of the promotion of the dental practice. For that purpose, you're the marketing CEO. Okay. Segment 2 is all about the nuts and the bolts of how to be a great dental CEO when it comes to promoting dentistry. Content of segment 2 is all about building a sound marketing plan. The document that you received from us after you did the online survey, how that information got there, what does that information mean? How should that guide you? What are your expectations from your promotion? That's a huge one,
Mhm.
right? We're going to discuss all those. And then properly managing the promotion of your practice will be in segment 3. So let's move on to segment 2. I'd like you to open up your marketing plan. And there are several sections to your marketing plan. One of them is understanding your specific market. One of them is calculating and applying your marketing budget properly. One of them is understanding return on investment. One of them is tracking and managing the results you receive from your promotion budget. All of that is in that marketing plan that we developed for you. Uh, Most important in that book is really your goals. One of the first questions we asked you when you went online, actually, I think it's the first question.
What are your marketing
What
goals?
are your marketing goals?
Right.
Okay, well, let's go over that one now. What are your marketing goals? This is up to you now. This isn't really up to us. It, are you in the 10th year of your practice and you're currently seeing 14 to 16 new patients a month? And we know statistically you need to see 19 to 22 a month if you're working 30 to 32 hours a week, 4 weeks out of the month. So you're probably a little short on your new patients. What are your goals? Are your goals to just get your 15 to 22 because you want to maintain a solo practice and regrow your revenues?
Mhm.
That's a that's a solid goal.
Mhm.
You may have loftier goals. You may have space, or you may be adding space to your existing more treatment rooms.
More
Maybe you're
capacity.
adding
Yeah.
more capacity, more hours to your work week. Um, in that case, you're going to need more new patients to fill your capacity. So you have to be very clear on what your marketing goals are before you start building your marketing plan.
This is especially true if you're taking on an associate or plan to. That's one of the reasons associateships often fail
Right,
is not enough patients for the new person.
right.
And then you start arguing and it ends badly. So you need to design and allocate your marketing with your goals in mind. And if that's to fill the associate's chair, then hallelujah.
And right,
That's
those
what
are
you
all
do.
numbers. The numbers we just gave you, 19 to 22 new patients a month per 32 hours of dentist chair hours per week it's been serving us very well for years.
Mhm.
All
That
right.
allows for growth.
Right, that's for average everything. You know, if you have an average scope of dentistry, You have average retention, basically John or Jane Q average solo practice, right?
Hmm.
So then now if you have two dentists, now it's not 19 to 22, it's now 38 to 44.
Hmm.
Do you see our point here? All right, you could be bringing on an associate for a certain number of hours a week. Most associates don't immediately transition into a practice full time. So let's say you're working 32 hours a week right now, and you want to add 16 hours of an associate's time each week. That's 50% increase in capacity
Hmm.
over what you're doing right now. So instead of 19 to 22 new patients a month, you're probably looking at somewhere around 34, 35, somewhere in there. What you're going to need in order to make the new associate happy, allow them to earn a living, make it so that the associate isn't taking all of your new patients, because you will protect your patient base if you don't have enough new patients coming into your practice. We know that's true. So those are your marketing goals. Here's another marketing goal. Happens all the time. Doctors will call us and say, I just took a course.
Hmm.
Nowadays, it could be sedation, sleep apnea, it could be 6-month smiles, it could be, almost anything,
Hmm.
really. I just took a course, and one of my marketing goals is to introduce this new service, right, to the marketplace, because it's new. It's new to me. It might be new to them, and I
Hmm.
might be able to build that side of my practice. That's a marketing goal in and of itself. So you have to take all those into consideration. Um, the barriers to reaching your goals. Normally, when we get that question back, we see,
Don't know how to do it.
I don't know how to do it.
Right.
Money.
Yeah.
I don't know what it
Yeah.
costs to do it right. Um, me. Sometimes they'll say
Yeah.
me. I'm the thing that gets in my way. Okay, that's fine. That makes perfect sense. Sometimes it's uh, there's too many there's too many details to doing it properly.
Right.
Like if you're going to manage, let's say a website, you're going to manage SEO, you're going to manage a mail campaign, and you're going to manage a print media campaign, for instance.
That's a lot to
That's
do.
a lot to manage. Okay, so a lot of times none of it gets done,
Hmm.
or it gets done improperly or poorly,
Hmm.
right? So other barriers to reaching your goals.
Well, I know one that we get quite a bit. I'm in a highly competitive area.
There
There's
you
a
go.
zillion other dentists around.
Right.
Many of them are promoting their practices,
Yep.
and I feel like I'm being left in the dust.
Yep.
That's a big barrier.
There are other barriers too that you need to be aware of. Man-made barriers, highways,
Hmm.
interstate highways usually,
Right.
rivers that dissect um, one market from the next with no bridge in between, mountains,
Yeah.
valleys, tunnels, socioeconomics.
Yeah.
That's a barrier. If your practice is located in a blue collar to white collar area,
Hmm.
and you're like many dentists will drive around looking for the McMansions and they'll promote into that area. Here's the bottom line. You can get someone that shops at Walmart to go to Nordstrom's, but people at Nordstrom's rarely ever go to Walmart. Okay, so it's not that it's impossible. You can do it, right? Chances are, if it's been done before, it can be done. Okay, you can do it, but it's still a barrier.
It's riskier.
Right, and that's going to alter your expectations, and that's what well, in large part, that's what almost all of this is about, is what should you expect from applying your marketing budget with your list of marketable attributes to your local market. That's what this next segment or two is going to cover. So how competitive is it right around you? There's a section of your workbook. And in that workbook, it shows you, it quantifies. And here's how it's done, basically. Take your dental office and put a push pin in the roof and then go out in a circle, 360-degree circle.
Hmm.
6, 7, 8 miles. Some of you probably have 2 miles because you're densely populated. Some of you may have 83 miles because
83
it's so
miles if you're in
sparsely
Oklahoma.
populated, okay? But it's a circle, and what we're looking for, one of the things we're looking for is supply and demand.
Dentist to population ratio.
How many dentists are servicing that market in that zip code,
Right.
right?
Right.
And the national average is 1 to 1650, 1700. So if you're looking at your marketing plan right now, I hope you are, and you're looking at the individual zip codes, which I hope you are, you can actually you can see pockets that are more competitive, and you can see pockets of greater opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And at the bottom, you can see the total. What are all the zip codes together, all the dentists together, all the population together? What's your whole doctor-patient ratio?
Right. Now, also know right away, now that you know that the average uh, doctor to patient ratio is 1 to 1650. So if you're in an area that's 1 to 3,000, well, you can have higher expectations
Rock and roll.
about
Right.
how your marketing is going to do. You're also going to have to, you'll be required to spend less money. It's way less riskier in that kind of environment. And you have much better and quicker chance of success. However, if you're unlucky enough to be located in Beverly Hills, California, it's a great
Yeah.
place to live and raise your family and all that, but there's one dentist for every 230 people.
Right.
That's tough.
Right.
That's real tough. Now, we're not saying you couldn't be successful. Actually, we do have a client in
Yeah,
Beverly Hills
right.
who's very successful.
Right.
But it's going to take a lot longer, and
Right.
it's going to cost a lot more money, and you have to be persistent, more persistent than you would be in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, for example,
Right. Or have more volume or
or have
more
more volume.
time. Right. And certainly the design of the pieces or whatever you're doing is going to be of more importance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I do want to add to what Hallie said. If you're in a 1 to 3,000, you find yourself in a wonderful supply demand market. Certainly there's an opportunity there for you to capture that market quickly. So it doesn't always end up meaning doing less. You might want to go into a 1 to 3,000 and capture more than your fair share of the market quickly before some other dentist discovers that it's a 1 to 3,000,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay.
And which is almost inevitable.
Wait, let's talk about Las Vegas here.
Yeah.
For a second.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, you've lived in Las Vegas a long time, and you and I both remember when Las Vegas, the dentists were all billionaires.
Yeah.
Okay. There's hardly any dentists here.
We hardly ever sold any of our books here in Vegas.
Right.
They didn't need new
They
patients.
didn't need new
They had
patients.
plenty.
Right.
And then the politicians perceived that there was a shortage of dentists. I think they were probably right.
Yeah.
One of the rare times a politician actually got something right. And they really eased up the licensure requirements.
Yep.
Out-of-state dentists could come in and fairly easily set up shop. And guess what? They did.
Here
in
they
droves.
came. They came over. Picture the covered wagons of the Old West, and nothing but dentists and their families in them, and they were coming.
Yeah.
And there was a big dust trail behind
Yeah.
them. All right.
And we were just, he hasn't been here in a few months. And so he says, we're driving down here today. He says, gee, I don't see very many dentists. There used to be a zillion. And then he started looking, and
Right.
oh, yeah, there's one, there's one.
There's one.
And there were literally 3 on every corner.
Right.
So it went from a very favorable doctor to patient ratio to a very unfavorable one.
In a matter of 5 years.
Or less.
Or less.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it was so. Anyway, the point is if you are in a great doctor-patient ratio, and let's say you're a startup, and you don't want to take 3 years or 4 years to build your practice, you want to have a 30-hour a week practice in a year. That may be the time to actually get more aggressive than normal. There's always balances, okay? But the doctor-patient ratio is one variable. There's multiple variables here. We ran demographic analyses. We're looking for owner-renter relationships. We're looking for industries. We're looking for projected growth by the U.S. Census. We're looking at all that stuff within your specific market area, taking it all into consideration to determine, not to determine if you should move, but to determine
what to expect.
What we expect. What should you expect? Because many dentists have way overblown expectations, and it causes them to apply marketing dollars, not get their lofty expectations met, pull the dollars, try them over here. Oh, that didn't work. pull them from there, try them over here. That didn't work. And then pretty soon you have a dentist that is always stressed
Hmm.
and never has their expectation met and is just throwing money against the wall.
We call it a try this, try that
It's a try
marketing
this,
plan.
right, try this, try that marketing plan. And it really does nothing for the practice and just causes the owner a whole bunch of stress.
Right.
Well, one of the ways you reduce stress is to have less uncertainty. So when you build a marketing plan, you do the analysis to create a level of certainty. All right. And let me address. There's no guarantees in marketing, just like there's no crying in baseball, right? Nobody's guaranteeing you anything. But if you can measure everything and measure it over a period of many, many years
Hmm.
and apply it over a period of many, many years and test everything, and you start to see what's the impact of this in this kind of a market. It's X. Well, you should expect X. You can hope for Y, but you don't build a marketing plan based on hope, right? You build it based on reality. Now, once you know the doctor-patient ratio within your what we call the core market area, um, then you wonder, well, where are all
The good
the great
patients,
patients?
where do
Okay,
they live?
where are they according to our matrix? Remember, in segment one, we've determined, and hopefully you've agreed, there are moms that will choose based on price. There are moms that will never choose based on price, and you're the CEO. You have a choice. We're not telling you what to do. We're just saying you can promote based on price. You can promote without being price primary,
Centric. Yeah.
price centric in your promotion. You can do both, but you have to do them independent of each other,
Right.
right? You can't do them together because that confuses both ends and that never works. All right. So you have to be a little careful there. Everything's a slight adjustment,
Right.
either way. Also in your plan is what your annual budget should be.
We get this question all the time. So
Right.
what should it be?
Well, for practices that gross under 1.5 million, 5% of your trailing 12-month revenue. So if I asked you the question, what were your collections over the last 12 months, you could go run a report from your practice management software and it would spit that number out at me. And then if I say, what are your goals for the next 12 months? You couldn't get a report for that, but you could say, okay, well, let's use an example. Let's say the practice produced and collected 800,000 in the last year. And the doctor, the owner, the CEO wants it to get to $1 million.
Hmm.
Okay, what you do is you multiply 800,000 times 5%, that's $40,000. You multiply the goal revenues times 5%, that's $50,000. There's your range. 40,000, shouldn't spend under 40
Right.
for the year.
And you shouldn't spend over 50
50, shouldn't spend over.
in most circumstances.
In 90% or
Yeah.
95% of the circumstances. Now,
Yeah.
that's for practices under 1.5 million in annual revenues. Once you're at 1.5 and above, typically, not always, but typically, we'll start them out at 4.5, 4.75, watch the results and project the ROI, which you're going to learn about. And over time, with a practice that size, you can actually drop the percentage each year normally. In about 75, 80% of the situations, you can normally drop. And you know what matters the most in those situations? The doctor's goals and the competitive makeup of the market area.
Hmm.
Okay, that's going to determine what your marketing budget should be
Hmm.
in a lot of cases. Now, the next piece of your marketing plan is how your budget should be allocated.
What are you going to do with
What are you
your
going to
budget?
do with it? I mean, it's
Yeah.
one thing to say, okay, I shouldn't spend under 40.
Hmm.
I shouldn't spend over 50. Well, that doesn't do you any good. What are you going to spend it on?
Right.
And when we say allocated, there's a good analogy that we use. We use it, your financial advisor, the person who is helping you plan for your retirement. You put your savings in an account and they are allocating it to certain degrees of risk
Mhm.
in investments. It depends on your age and what your ultimate goals are and the market and all. But basically, they're saying save this much. Once you save it, give it to me, and I will allocate your savings into the appropriate vehicles
Mm.
that will reduce your risk.
Same thing with marketing.
It's the same thing with marketing.
You want to do the least riskiest thing with your marketing dollar
First.
first, and then you can, as you are successful, you can go down the list and start trying some things that contain a bit more risk.
Right, because the things you did first or second will actually support
Hmm.
the slightly riskier investments.
Right. So this
Okay.
tells you at once that you shouldn't, if you're just starting out marketing your practice, you shouldn't run out and spend your entire marketing budget on some TV ads.
Right.
Very poor, it's very high risk.
It may work,
It may work a little bit,
but the
yeah.
chances of it working uh,
You know,
unsupported,
we could go down to the craps
we can
table
go
and
down.
get
Yeah,
better odds.
exactly. We just go, yeah, just come to Las Vegas and roll the dice. Okay, that's um, so the allocation of your budget was very carefully calculated based on where you told us you were in your career and what other marketing assets you currently have. You may already have invested in marketing assets. One of the
Hmm.
most common ones would be internal promotions.
Hmm.
You may have care
Website.
to share cards, external promotions. You may already have a website, and it may be just fine. It may not be hurting you whatsoever, and you're good to go. Those are all assets that you invest in over time, but you invest in them here first, get those generating a response, and then if you have any room left over, you can go up from there.
Mhm.
And if you get a little room there and you're producing here, the next level up, and we're going to go through all those levels with you,
Mhm.
okay? And which order you're supposed to um, promote them in.
Because there is a proper order, and a lot of times you get yourself into a lot of trouble by messing with the order.
Yes, definitely,
You don't want to do that.
for several reasons. So when you're looking at your marketing goals, what we want you to do is how many patients do you want or need? So what you have to do is go back and look at your numbers in your practice, and you now know 19 to 22 a month for every 32 dentist hours a week. You can be very concise with that number now. We just asked you on the survey, so now you want to relook at that number, look at your existing new patient flow, and come up with a finite number. The other thing you need to do is consider your capacity. How many hours? How many chairs? There's only 3 capacities in a dental practice: the number of dental hours, the number of office hours,
Providers.
and providers and treatment rooms.
Yeah, treatment rooms.
There's really
Yes.
3. Okay, so if you're not expanding any of those 3, you ought to be able to know almost exactly how many new patients a month you need in order to grow revenues basically indefinitely,
Hmm.
because that 19 to 22 number is that number. Are you planning on adding or removing any capacity over the next 12 months? Um, Another concept that I want to introduce here, which is near and dear to all of we we get a lot of referrals by consultants, and this is a near and dear to their heart. It's near and dear to my heart. The front door versus the back door. One of the things that you need to do um, before you deploy a new marketing strategy is measure the number of new patients coming in for the last year against the number of patients overdue in your recall for the last year. So for instance, let's say you are getting 20 new patients a month and there's 240 new patients in the last year on your books. Go run an overdue recall list for the same time period and count up that number of patients. If it comes up to near 240, you have a net new patient growth of 0. I can almost predict for you that in the future, your revenues are going to flatten out.
Mm.
Okay. The back door of your practice, if there are any holes there, if you don't have a system to your recare, if I'm not going to get into a big practice management discussion here, but if you're not 100% satisfied with how that piece of your practice is performing, while you're building your marketing plan forward, pay attention to those systems, most notably the recare system, the follow-up, what your percentage is, the retention, and so on and so forth. Because it really doesn't make any sense to go spend money to bring new patients through the front door if the back door of the practice is just as open as the front door.
Mm-hmm.
You have 240 in, 240 out, your practice isn't growing.
You're treading water. Actually, you're sinking.
Right, 240 in, 140 out. 6 months from now, your revenues are going up. That's just the way it works, okay? So you have to consider both, the front and the back door. What we don't want to make you is a new patient junkie.
Right.
And we get those.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a doctor that says, okay, now I'm getting my 25 or 26 new patients a month. I want more, I want more. And it's a solo GP working 32 hours a week. And it's a big red flag in our department because we sit there and go, wait a second, how come?
Yeah.
Where are all the ones that you had?
Where did they go?
Where did they go? Okay, so keep
And
it.
I'm sorry, but actually, it's not really just and only the back door. Sometimes it's the front door.
Yeah,
They come in
right.
and the call isn't handled properly, or a receptionist or they don't feel welcome, and they don't even make it to the back door. They just turn around and go right out the front door again.
We're going to talk about that too.
We're going to get into that too.
Yeah. So now I want to take you to your marketing plan, and specifically I want to look at the doctor-patient ratio section. And I want you to look at your doctor-patient ratio. It might be 1 to 600, it might be 1 to 6,000. Now you know what that means to you and what your expectations should be. Go a little bit further than that, because there is other evidence that only you can see in your market. How many promotions do you see other dentists near you sending out or placing in a magazine or a newspaper or the
Radio.
Yellow Pages or the radio or the television, in any medium? Do you see a lot of dentists doing it? Do you see very few dentists doing it? Okay. If you're in a market area that's competitive, chances are there's a lot more dentists promoting their own practice. If you're in a market area that's a little higher than the national average, chances are you might see 1 or 2. And you might see them every once in a while, not a lot,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Because they have less of a need to promote.
They have less of a need to promote, okay? If you're in a competitive environment and there are tons of dentists spending a significant amount of money on marketing and doing it at least reasonably well,
Mm-hmm.
that adds to your competitive ratio.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. You could be in a 1 to 1,300, for instance, that you don't hardly see any promotion from any other dentist. That's to your advantage. If you're the one person out there, or maybe one of the 2 people out there promoting dentistry properly, that adds to your opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
right? See another scenario. Here's another scenario. Let's say you're in a 1 to 12 or 1,300. You see other dentists promoting their practices, but they're all promoting them based on price.
Mm-hmm.
And,
or very few benefits.
Or very few benefits. And you only need 8, 9, 10 additional really good patients a month to get your practice back and cooking. And you end up being the only dentist in town that promotes based on the benefits of dentistry. Now, the perception in the marketplace is that you're the only dentist that does that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Remember, we're talking perception here, not reality. That would add to your expectation. At that point, you would think you'd get more than average
Mm-hmm.
response out of your marketing dollar. So there's a balance here. You have to be careful with the balance. Hopefully, the workbook that you have is helping you see all those balances,
Mm-hmm.
so that you can adjust your expectations accordingly. Now, we initially said that we were going to lay out the foundation, lay out the steps, discuss with you the allocation. What should you use your marketing budget for first, second, third, fourth, fifth, even sixth sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
This slide, if you have this slide in front of you, write notes on it, dog ear it, highlight it, put a neon sign on it, okay? This is your list. This is your master list. The first thing in this list is always going to be the least expensive, always going to be the easiest to generate a return,
Least risk.
and it's always the least risk, okay? Internal promotion, supportive promotion, and public relation activities.
We start with internal because,
Mhm.
so we don't get accused of keeping the obvious to ourselves, it's much easier to promote to people who already know you, they
Right,
like you, they've already given you money,
right,
you know where they live, you have their addresses, you can send them things
right.
and electronic communications and so forth. So your response rate to your people who are already in the fold is going to be much better than, in fact, it costs you 5 times as much to go out and get
Right.
a new patient as it does to reactivate or keep an existing patient
Or to get them to refer.
or to get them to
Right.
refer.
All
Right.
those activities. Right.
Right.
Now, if your practice is to the point, let's say that you need 19 to 22 new patients a month, you're not really promoting your practice externally, and you're currently attracting 12 new patients a month to your practice. And you have your internal and your supportive being a website.
Mhm.
You do public relation activities up to your level of satisfaction. You're doing all those things.
Yeah,
And
PR activities being things like candy buyback program, you know,
smiles
supporting
from the heart.
yeah,
Right. Yeah,
supporting local charities,
right.
that sort of thing. That's
Right.
what we mean by public relations activities.
Right. In other words, you do all those things, and it's generating 12 new patients a month. But we know that the practice needs 19 to 22, so the practice needs another 7 to 9 a month. Well, now you have to go externally, right?
Hmm.
There's no reason to believe that with your current patient base, your current supportive medium, and your current public relation activities, that they're all of a sudden going to double overnight into creating more of a result. They're not. So you have a certain level. Now you have to go external. The first place you put external dollars is going to be in most US markets, and honestly, most markets in Australia and in Canada and in Ireland and wherever else we work, is mail. Um, the way, and we're going to go through these in subsequent segments, but the right way to do mail is successful in 96% of the US markets. There isn't anything close to that from a risk standpoint. You have a 4% chance of striking out. If you were a baseball player and you were hitting 960, if A-Rod's making 200 million every 10 years or every 6 years, you'd be a $1 billion baseball player. Okay, so just to put it into perspective, if you were hitting 96% in Las Vegas, they would throw you out of every casino, right? So you have a 4% chance of it not working. It is always the first place you go externally. Now,
This is provided that it's done correctly,
oh,
which we're going to share with you.
absolutely, provided that it's done correctly, which you're going to learn how later on in other segments. Now, let's say you have a mail campaign and it's working, and you know it's working, which we're also going to discuss in the next segment. What do you do next? Let's say you ran your marketing budget and you have more room in it, right? A little more room. And what do? Now you allocate a certain percentage. There's that word again, allocate. Now you allocate a certain percentage into the print media. Believe it or not, the print media is still the second on the hit parade.
It's viable.
Okay, it's very
Yeah.
viable in most markets. That's why it's second. Um, Now, let's say you have your internal, your public relations, your website, your internet, you have your mail going out, and you have enough room in the budget for print, and that's working, and you still want to grow. And your budget got bigger. Now you go into mass media, radio, television, billboards, whatever. And we're going to talk about those as well when we get into all the mediums and in future segments. Those are the steps. So take this page of your workbook and look at that page or that section of your marketing plan, because we told you on your marketing plan you should put this percentage into this percentage into this, and this percentage into this. Dog ear it, put a neon sign on it, and refer back to it for the rest of your dental career, because if you follow this, you will absolutely follow the least risk path, right?
Mm-hmm.
The next slide that you're looking at is, it's not really hypothetical. I mean, it's a spreadsheet, obviously. But it's not hypothetical. This is year 1 through 9 of a dental practice, the revenues of the dental practice each year, and the annual investment in marketing, and how you build your foundation first, use your foundation and the benefits from your foundation to fuel your first floor, and then you keep going through your first floor until you have enough money to invest in a roof. It's the same thing as building a home. You would not build a roof with no foundation, and you would not build the first floor until the foundation was solid enough to hold up the weight, right?
Right.
Right.
Now, this is especially as you approach the outlying years here, and you contemplate radio, TV, or even billboards. The reason that you will likely find that you're much more successful with the mass mediums if you have the foundation, the first floor in place, because it's not like the target market hasn't seen anything from you before.
Right.
They've got mail in their mailbox from you. Maybe they've heard you around town. Maybe you had some columns in the newspaper or articles in the newspaper about your charity events or candy buyback program, et cetera, et cetera. Similarly, if you progress to the first floor and you go after print media, inserts, ads, magazine ads, so there's familiarity that you're building as time goes on. So when they now see you on TV or hear you on the radio, you're not a complete stranger.
No.
But you are if that's what you do first.
Right. That's correct. Now, let me give you a geometric way to look at this too, because this is also important. When you mail, your circle around your practice is going to be relatively small because of the way it should be targeted.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 4-mile radius,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. So you're going to mail there. Well, if you're going to invest in print media, the print media is not getting delivered to just that little circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's why it's riskier.
It's partly why it's riskier, and it's not targeted either, right?
Right.
But now instead of this little circle, you're going to have exposure to a broader circle, and it's going to go on top of your little circle where your mail's going. So now you do that and you get that going, and that's providing results. Now you look at radio, which may have a 15-mile circle. So you have the male prospective patients who have heard from you, and they are on a consistent basis. You have your print media people who you may be mailing to them, or you may not. They may be this may be the first time you've ever touched them. And then you have your radio. So everything is it's like a funnel, like an oil funnel. Okay. You have your mail, you have your little bit bigger circle of your print, you have your wider circle of your mass media, and everything helps each other.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that radio and television and billboards don't work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what we're telling. If that's what you got out of this, that's not what we're telling you. They do work. They just work with prerequisites.
Mm-hmm.
And the risk associated with them goes down dramatically with the prerequisites in place already.
Right.
Okay, that's the point of this slide. That's the way you take a practice from 500,000 a year to 1.5 million, slowly, steady over a period of time in an average market. Okay, the less competitive the market, the less time it's going to take. the more competitive the market, the more time it's going to take. So this might be another uh, piece of your workbook that you might want to dog ear or put a highlight on, because you're going to want to refer back to this one sometime in the future as well. Where are the best potential patients in a given market? Distance. Remember, we went through the segment one, all about the dental consumer. How far away from you are they? And the answer to that question is always as close as possible,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
You don't want to put too many dentists between you and the target when you're mailing. You want to put as few dentists between you and the target. Convenience is a big deal,
Hmm.
as we saw with the consumer study. Culture. Are you promoting into an area that is largely one ethnicity and trying to draw them into an area that might not be,
Right.
right? Socioeconomics we talked about, all those barriers that we talked about. Um, when we do targeting, we use a system called Equifax. It's actually they're owned by
Hmm.
Epsilon now.
Yeah.
What they do is they take 4 criteria: geography, creditworthiness, household income, and a marketability index. And they study everyone in a geographic circle. That's exactly what you're looking at on your marketing plan, is an EVS score, Equifax value score of a range. Usually it's B1 through A1, A1 through C1 maybe, depends on how densely populated you are.
Right.
What we're doing there is we're segmenting the top 40 to 50% of the market out, so that if you're going to mail, if you're going to use your money to mail, you're not going to, you might have Maple Street, may have 13 houses on it, but you're only going to hit about 6 of them. You're not going to hit all 13 houses on Maple Street, because
Right.
7 of them aren't going to qualify for your mailer.
Right. And, back in the day, in the old days, it was mainly household income. And that's still a valuable
Right.
part of the score. But in the days of easy money and Quicken loans and lending tree
Lending
loans and all
Tree,
of this, right?
Ditech. Right.
Without having to prove your income, people said they make 300,000 when they really made 75.
Right.
So the databases got corrupted with all of this falsity, and you'd end up getting mail lists that were, you know,
Largely inaccurate,
yeah, largely
to say the
inaccurate.
least. Right.
So this was, of course, a threat to Equifax's business
Right.
and our own, and I'm sure we weren't the only ones who complained about it.
No.
But they responded, and they developed these value scores. Now Equifax knows the credit score of every one of you and me and Mark.
Right.
But it is illegal for them to identify us as individuals for marketing purposes,
Right.
right? So when they sell their mailing lists, they cannot identify individuals and their market and their credit scores. But what they can do is take an area, a neighborhood, and come up with their algorithm, which they don't share with anybody, for an aggregate value for that area. And they can identify within that area household incomes, and
Right.
it's a much more accurate system for
And
targeting.
much more effective.
Mhm.
Really,
All right.
much more effective. Mail isn't cheap. I mean, you're looking at 58 to 60 cents, 65 cents,
Mhm.
once everything's designed and produced and mailed. And I mean, once you figure out all the costs, you don't mail because it's the least expensive thing to do, because it's not, right? You mail because it's the most effective thing to do and has the least risk.
Right.
Okay. So, all right. Segment 2. What have we learned, Howie? What did we learn, man? Your marketing plan is in your hands. It has many, 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 many sections to it. Your goals. You learned how to determine what your goals should be based on 19 to 22 new patients per month per 32 hours of dentist chair time.
You learned your competitive arrangement in your area,
That's
what the
right.
doctor-patient ratio is, so you can adjust your expectations of marketing results using that number.
Right. You learned your barriers. You may have no barriers, or you may have a practice in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. which is surrounded by 4 mountains, 3 tunnels, and 3 bridges, as we all know. Okay. You might be on the west side of the Hudson River or on the east side of the Hudson River, or in Southern California, for instance, you might be on the east side of the 5 or on the west side of the 5. Okay.
Mhm.
And if your targets can't get to you, it's a barrier.
Or don't want to.
Right, or don't want to, right. We went through the barriers, we went through allocation.
And the budgeting is not a dirty word.
Budgeting is not a dirty word. We went through the allocation. What do you allocate your budget to first, second, third, fourth? Why? Based on risk, and how each one of those helps build less risk for everything that happens later on down the road, right?
Mhm.
We went through internal promotion, public relations. We went through websites as supportive or at their own external. We're going to talk about websites in segment in the future. We're going to break down the internet completely in the future. In segment 4, or excuse me, segment 3, we're going to take the marketing plan now and we're going to show you how to manage it, um, how to track the incoming inquiries, what those incoming inquiries really mean, what those new patient numbers to your goal mean, um, what to expect if you promote to the bottom of the market or the top of the market. What is ROI and why does every dentist not calculate it correctly? And we're going to teach you how to calculate it correctly. So segment 3 is a very important follow-up to this segment because after segment 3, we're going right into all the mediums. We're going to go into internal. We're going to go into websites. We're going to get to mail, print, radio, a little bit of television. We're going to go into all of them. We're going to go into design. Um, so we'll see you in segment 3.
Thank you.
We wanted to take a moment to share with you some of the input we've received during our live presentations of our dental marketing summits. There's so much value in the questions that we get from the audience. Um, it helps us understand what they're absorbing, what's still missing, and even though this is an online CE with no audience, we wanted to introduce some of the questions we normally get. Um, we've received questions in the past, mostly surrounding the barriers. Um, some are surrounding the annual budgets. I don't have one. I don't ever want to have one. We've received questions from, and I'll do this politically correct, um, dentists who have been practicing for, say, 25 years, who may say, you know what, I've never promoted before, and I don't think I want to promote. I remember the days uh, when I didn't have to promote, or when my colleagues would have thought I did schlock dentistry if I promoted in anything outside of the yellow pages.
Right.
The bottom line is if you're getting 12 or 13 new patients a month and you want to grow your practice and you need to go to 19 to 22, and those are all coming from internal and PR activities, you pretty much need to promote your practice. Um, Targeting. We get questions all the time about the targeting. The doctors will come to us and say, I don't want to target people from that zip code because their perception is that nobody worthwhile lives in that zip code.
Right. Which can be very deceiving. And
Oh,
this is this is all falls under the category of moving away from feeling or sensing
right,
or kind of knowing to really knowing and being certain. That's why we run the value targets, the EVA scores in an area, because we see this all the time. Not everybody's card is maxed out.
right.
Not everybody's upside down on their mortgage, although most are. There
Not everybody lives outside their means.
Exactly.
Right,
Some
right,
people are actually responsible with their money and have money for health concerns like dentistry. So you can prejudice yourself by thinking, I don't want anybody from, that area of town because they're all deadbeats, when there probably are some really good targets in that area.
Right. On the subject of proper deployment, um, we'll almost always have a dentist in the audience who says, "Yeah, but Mark, when I started, I did radio and it worked," and that's fine. We're not saying that radio doesn't work. What we're saying, normally my question back to the doctor is, "Well, how long did you advertise in the radio?" And typically the answer is 18 months to 2 years. And I said, "Well, why'd you stop? I mean, if it worked,
Yeah.
why are you here? What'd you stop it for?" And usually the story is the same. When I started it, it worked really, really well. And then I kept investing money in it. And over time, I received less and less and less response. So then eventually I quit doing it. And that's kind of our point. He hadn't softened up the market area. They didn't know anything else about him or her beside what they were promoting, usually the one thing they were promoting on the radio. And we will get into that when we discuss radio. So there's always a bell curve. You always have a bell curve with all marketing where you have a ramp up period where results come in quite strong. The trick is to keep the bell curve at its highest point for as long as possible. So
All the while knowing that it will eventually drop off.
right. We always get questions about marketability because we'll let people know, "Hey doc, intraoral cameras are marketable. Digital x-rays are marketable." And the dentists are so close. They've been working with intraoral cameras now for 25 years. They just don't believe there's any marketability in the intraoral camera or even digital x-rays, which have been around now for 15 years. They think it's worn out. It's not worn out. There are plenty of people, which our study clearly showed, that had no clue. More than 50% of them had no clue what the benefits of the use of the intraoral camera were. Now the benefits and how you present them are key,
Mhm.
right? But don't lose the point. The point is that what's old to you right now, what's boring to you right now, is brand new news
Mhm.
to the majority of the top half of the dental market.
Mhm.
And we just wanted to share some of those questions that we get in our live presentations. So hopefully you can take those questions as perhaps some of your own questions. If you ever have any other questions, you can always either call us or email us. So we hope this was helpful for you.